Welcome to State of Affairs. My name is Nana Abanamo. We're live on GH1 TV, also streaming live on gh1tv.com. And also you can follow the discussion on social media by using the hashtag State of Affairs. And we'll be happy to read out your messages. This evening we are discussing a number of things. Of course, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia has outlined a 10-point plan to tackle unemployment if the NPP should win the North, to occupy the Flagstaff House. A number of them actually: formalizing the economy, he says, financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, also diversifying the export base of the country, and deliberately pursuing policies to make Ghana the production hub in the sub-region. Are these attainable? Can he really make these a reality if the NPP wins the election? Well, we'll be discussing that tonight with Kennedy Ejapong, who's Member of Parliament for Asin North constituency. But first, we have with us this evening the British High Commissioner to Ghana, John Benjamin. It's good to have you here with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's always great to talk to you, John. I mean, you talk about everything.
So, well, I at least try to answer all the questions that people put to me.
You try, huh? You do. Well, tonight, a number of things that I want to talk to you about. Of course, we'll talk about social media because you run into people and they say, I think John Benjamin is the only, diplomat in Ghana who really understands social media. So we'll find out from you what it is about social media that you like so much, and if really you think social media is more of a blessing or a curse. Also, we'll discuss visas. It's a very interesting topic for a lot of Ghanaians who want to travel to the UK, especially those who think that they apply with the right documents but are still denied visas to travel to your country. And we'll talk about the president's visit to Scotland. Of course, he generated some debate here. I'll start off with politics, our elections that are coming up. I'm sure you've been monitoring the media terrain. You've seen all the activities, especially from the two parties, the NPP and the NDC. What are your expectations? And I know from where you're coming from, you cannot really comment so much on our internal issues. But what are your expectations of this election?
Well, firstly, good evening, Nana. Thank you for the invitation. I knew you were going to sneak visas in there somewhere. I think
it's important.
I've been in Ghana for 2 years now. I don't think I've yet had a day when the subject didn't come up in some shape or form. So I was kind of expecting that. On the election, well, first of all, I'm really looking forward to seeing it because, like all diplomats in Ghana, I'm here for 3-4 years. So nearly all foreign diplomats get to see just one election, and that's it. And then they move on to their next posting in another place. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I don't think I need to say this, and it needs to be said, but for the sake of putting it on the record, Britain is obviously completely neutral. The elections are completely a sovereign Ghanaian affair. We hope for peaceful and credible elections for Ghana, for the people of Ghana. Also because Ghana sets such an example in the region where there are a range of different forms of elections and governments, and Ghana is really kind of like the yardstick to measure the development of democracy in the wider region by. So it sends out a very important signal.
You were recently in Benin. How was that election? I mean, I realized you were an election observer during that election. How was it for you? And are there any challenges you experienced there that you thought, that could have been corrected ahead of the polls?
Well, Benin is ranked alongside Ghana as one of the freest countries on the continent of Africa. There's an NGO based in the US called Freedom House, and they publish extensive surveys. So Benin is right up there. It's a good example of functioning democracy. Of course, in Benin, it was a slightly different case. It was an outgoing president who'd filled his 2 terms of the mandate, and so it was somewhat open in that respect. It went to a second round, but yeah, it was well run.
But
it was
impressive,
peaceful, and it was very peaceful. In fact, I don't think we heard of a single case of violence or a single accusation of serious electoral malpractice, which is of great credit to Benin, quite remarkable in its way. But here in Ghana, what we would like to do is to work with the Electoral Commission, who are interested in a certain amount of support from outside. And next week we'll have a visit here by couple of British ministers, and we will
including
be...
Adam Afriyie.
Adam Afriyie, exactly, yeah. Well, he's our trade envoy,
Okay.
but we have him and 2 ministers from the government. And I can't reveal too many details now, but we will be announcing a package of assistance to the Electoral Commission and others, like the police and the judiciary, to prepare for the elections. And however, what happens in the elections is, of course, solely up to the people of Ghana, and we'll very, very happily work with whoever's elected, as we've done in the past and as we will in the future.
And you have been, I mean, over the last 5-10 years, we've seen increased support for the police, especially from the British government, from the British, from the UK, and also for the judiciary. Last year, I think you launched something very major for the judiciary. Now, we've seen this year alone how 2 fugitives were arrested by the police here in Ghana. And I saw you comment the security agencies on Twitter for their close collaboration, working with the British authorities. Is this something you want to comment further on? Well,
we do have very close cooperation. As you can imagine, a lot of it is operational, and therefore it's confidential. It's not, it's not something which you can discuss in detail in public, but it's no secret that we do have that close cooperation. It covers many areas: drugs trafficking, people trafficking, other types of international crime, including cyber crime, where we work together with the government of Ghana very closely. And linking back to the elections, which was your opening question, it's very important, because in any country, not just Ghana, not just the UK, but anywhere, ideally, it's solely the role of the police to maintain security at all times, and including during elections. So we're a little concerned when people discuss kind of whatever you want to call them, vigilante groups, militias, private security for any party, it doesn't matter which party, because then potentially security is being contracted out to private interests, and can spiral off in unpredictable ways. And I think it's very important to support the police in being the sole arbiters of how to maintain public security.
Okay, and so far you're impressed?
Yeah, well, the police themselves, obviously, by dealing with us and many other donor partners in looking for cooperation, recognise that there's areas where they could strengthen and improve, and we are working with them in identifying what those needs are, specifically related to the election. But more widely, you mentioned the 2 arrests we've already had this year. It's been quite a remarkable start to 2016, really, and in both cases those arrests were and the individuals concerned were very high profile in the UK. So we were very happy to work with not just with the police, with the judiciary, with the BNI, various ministries that were involved. And of course, one case from the Ghanaian perspective is concluded in the sense that the person was extradited back to the UK a few weeks ago. In the other case, of David McDermott, which is has been reported widely, that extradition case is being heard at the moment at our request, but of course the decision is totally up to Ghana's judiciary to decide.
Okay, now we move on to something that is also very topical as far as this election is concerned: corruption. I mean, it's such a major issue in every election that we experience in this country. Yet many say that we talk about it every time. I mean, this year is such a big issue. The NDC is screaming, the NPP is screaming, the other parties are screaming, the media is screaming, civil society is screaming about corruption. Transparency International has its own figures saying that we've improved marginally. Now, would you say that for the period that you've been here, you've seen enough commitment to fight corruption, knowing very well that corruption is everywhere anyway? But would you say that the mechanisms here for fighting corruption are effective enough?
Well, I think, look, corruption, I appreciate it's a very thorny subject, and I agree, there's corruption everywhere. It's part of the human condition for those who want to be tempted by it. We have corruption cases in the UK. I think it's about systems and it's about values, because to me, corruption is 2 things. Of course, it's a moral issue. Of course it is. Either it's about people just stealing the assets that should belong to the people, or it's about people abusing their position in order to enrich themselves. So it's always going to be a moral issue, but it's also a straightforward, dispassionate economic argument, because it is a brake on the development of any country, including Ghana. So when resources are diverted to an individual's pocket or to other means that were meant for schools and hospitals and infrastructure, it means those things don't get built and the services they were going to provide the population don't get offered. So it really is fundamentally important. I think there are so many studies internationally which show a correlation between corruption and the negative effect it has on development. I don't think that's remotely in question. I think, therefore, as I've always said here during my time in Ghana, whenever the subjects come up, it's about systems and values. It's about people knowing very firmly what the rules are and serious sanction being taken against people who transgress. I think that's the important thing. When in Britain 30 years ago, frighteningly, when I joined the Foreign Service.
30 years?
Yep, 30
oh
years
my
a couple
God,
of weeks
you've
ago.
done this for 30 years?
Yes, I have.
And you speak how many languages? I mean, it amazes me every time I see you tweet in a different language. I get so jealous and angry.
Oh, I can't remember,
both.
6 or 7, but
Six or seven
sadly,
languages.
not Twi, not Ewe, not Ga, not yet. I'm too old to learn a new language, I think. But anyway, the point, when I joined the Foreign Service or the Civil Service in the UK, it was made very, very, very clear from day one what the rules are and what the cost would be of breaking them with regard to financial propriety and accounting for things. And therefore a system is there and a kind of set of values is inculcated in the people. I think it's about that. But again, it's a subject we do work on closely with the government of Ghana. There's a big EU project that was announced before Christmas, of which we're part. And again, it's an area that DFID, which is the economic development arm of the British government, is also going to be announcing some new work in quite soon. So it's not a question of just kind of criticising an issue, it's trying to constructively help in addressing it.
Okay, so you think that you're making enough impact?
Well, I don't think it's just for us to make impact. I think it's a societal issue. I think it's generational. I think it's slow. It doesn't change overnight. But I think it's important to keep down that track. It's important that that standards are set and basically that punishments are in place also for people who transgress.
Punishments, I mean, people talk about punishments all the time, and clearly you see people who misappropriate funds in high offices, and they're not punished, they're not penalized properly. And so it leaves a lot of the people sitting back and saying that it looks like this is ingrained in us. I mean, we accept it. Would you agree when people say that corruption is probably a cultural issue for many countries across the world?
Oh, I think, of course. I mean, corruption isn't separate from every other tendency going on in a society. Personally, I do think the punishment angle is important. It sends out a clear message. It means people can't claim not to know that a certain type of behaviour is wrong. But also, I mean, Ghana's a very free society, free media, a lot of media. I think it's also important that those issues are raised and discussed because in a democracy, public pressure and has a direct link to public policy. So it's important the issue is discussed and that people just don't kind of throw up their hands in resignation that it's somehow natural and always going to be there. Things can change.
Okay, now let's talk about, I'll come to visas very soon, but recently you were in Scotland with the President. Mm-hmm. I saw a picture of you sitting behind him.
Yes.
You posted it actually on Twitter.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that visit generated some concern in the media that some MPs in the Scottish Parliament boycotted the President because they were not happy with the treatment of homosexuals and other minorities in this country. You spoke to a number of media houses, including Star FM, and you said that the reports were false.
I think I said they were massively exaggerated.
Okay.
I mean, as you said, I was there. I saw it. Or, more importantly, in this case, I didn't see it. So all these boycotts were reported, allegedly. I didn't see a boycott.
So there was no boycott?
I didn't see anyone. I didn't see anyone walk out. Now, the chamber wasn't completely full, but then the chamber was going about its business, and is very rarely completely full, but I didn't see anyone walk out. I did see a very generous and polite round of applause from all the MPs I could see from where I was sitting for the President. I was with the President when he subsequently addressed a cross-party group in the Scottish Parliament. The room was full. So I don't know what this alleged boycott is supposed to be about.
But did the issue of gays and lesbians come up at all?
It came up a little bit, but only a little bit. I mean, it was a very tiny part of the total subject matter that was discussed. Look, I'm very clear about this. We have hugely different views in the UK and in Ghana on this issue. We have very different views in the UK now to the views we had when I was a kid and when I was growing up. Societies evolve and change and take different views. And our views on the subject are clear. It's not something I'm going to apologise for. I support our stance on gay rights. And I know some people don't like that and disagree with that, but which is fine. It's a free society. People can do that, and I respect that. But neither are we going to apologise for our views on the subject. But it really did form a really, really tiny part of the visit. And I was amazed by how it was reported here in Ghana, to be honest.
Yeah?
Yeah, because it bore no resemblance, really, to my perception, having, again, physically been there all the way through the visit, to what actually happened.
Okay. But what was the concern when this issue came up? What was the exact concern? That we should decriminalize it, give them more space? What exactly was the concern?
Well, again, that's part of the mystery of how this was reported. I didn't hear anyone express concerns directly to us or to me, but obviously gay rights organisations, NGOs and so on in the UK lobby for the same recognition and the same rights worldwide that we now have in the UK. But that's not something directed exclusively and specifically at Ghana. It's a general trend. But as I say, I think we were all mystified, all of us who were on that trip, as to how this issue really exploded here in media terms here in Ghana, when in fact it barely formed any part of our experience of that whole visit to Scotland.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about visas. Before then, though, and for those of you expecting other questions about visas, just hold on for me just a second. Education in the UK. I mean, you probably would have 3 out of 5 Ghanaian students, planning to go to the UK to study. And I know that there've been a lot of fairs here in Ghana, UK universities coming in here to organize fairs. Even some are setting up here. Lancaster University is one of them. Do you get overwhelmed by visa applications from students to go study in your country?
I wouldn't say overwhelmed. In fact, it's probably, I don't have the figure now immediately to hand. I'm happy to look it up for you. But student visas are a reasonably small percentage of the totality of visa applications that we get. Yeah, because of the links between Britain and Ghana, the family links and so on, the diaspora of British Ghanaians, who are hundreds of thousands of people in the UK, there's an awful lot of interpersonal links which explain a lot of the visa requests. We encourage educational exchanges. We have a lot of Ghanaian students. We offer some scholarships ourselves. The Chevening scholarships. Of course, the government of Ghana has its own scholarship scheme, and then there are a lot of people who go privately, and it's important. On visas generally...
Before you go on,
yes.
I mean, for the university fairs that were organized here, what was the feedback from it? Do you get a number of people trying to get into the UK to study?
Yes, and of course, they have to choose, indicate which university they want to go to first and which course, and then prove that they have the funds to pay for that course if they're not on a scholarship. And that's a process, and of course where we're in March, so really it only becomes clear about kind of August how many people are going for the subsequent academic year to the UK. But yes, of course we encourage that. The university tertiary education sphere, market if you like, is huge for the UK. We have an enormous number of people. It's expensive, but it's, for some people, it's good quality.
Absolutely.
And it attracts hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world, literally all over the world, who in a very competitive global marketplace for tertiary education have many other alternatives to look at. So it means something when they choose the UK over other available alternatives.
Okay, do you recognize those pictures? That's your country.
Yeah, that seems kind of somewhat familiar. Yeah, yeah, I do recognise that.
All right then. Okay, now let's talk about visas. I mean, if you see, oh, that's a very beautiful one, the London Eye.
Yeah.
Okay, people seeing these pictures, and there are people who want to go to London, for instance, to see London. I mean, if anybody follows your tweets, you make London look great.
I don't need to make London look great. It is great.
It is great. One of the greatest cities in the world, actually. And then the applications come in. And every day you find people on Twitter claiming, I applied, I had the right documents, but I was refused.
Yeah.
Some actually think that the High Commission sets out to refuse a number of people in a day.
Yeah.
Is that the plan?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking, because it gives me a chance to say that is complete and utter nonsense. We don't have a quota, and we don't have a set number. Now, we have the figures now for 2015. We approved considerably more visas than we refused.
Okay.
More than half, in other words, well more than half. So I can dispel that notion of a quota. It simply isn't true. I'm aware that there are people who, despite me saying that, choose to believe the opposite. It's their choice. My obligation is to say what the facts are, and the facts are there is no quota. Nana, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the requirements. If you want to go to the UK and need a visa, there are three basic requirements. One is to show what the reason for going is, and there's a legitimate reason. Secondly, importantly, that you have the financial means to support yourself while there. And thirdly, that you're going to come back to Ghana afterwards and not remain beyond the period that's given on the visa. And that's basically the requirement. And if people fulfill that requirement, they get their visa. And now, when people appear on Twitter saying, I fulfilled all the requirements and didn't get a visa, well, it's their opinion that they fulfilled all the requirements. If it was our opinion that they'd fulfilled all requirements, they'd get a visa. But also, I have to say, every day, every single day, we have applications supported by, sadly, by false bank accounts, false
Is it on the rise?
academic qualifications, basically false documentation, false reference
Is it
letters.
increasing?
It's difficult to say it's increasing. The figures for the percentage of visas applications that we accept and refuse is somewhat constant over the last few years. So I wouldn't say it's increasing. Sometimes the sophistication behind the attempts to supply false documents is increasing. Again, but that's not unique to our experience around the world, where we have a visa requirement. But I know this point isn't always welcome, but if someone goes to Britain from any country, including Ghana, but from anywhere else, and stays beyond the period of their visa, or from the get-go can't support themselves financially, we have a free healthcare system, we have welfare payments, unemployment payments. It means that someone who makes claim to those resources without ever having been part of the British system, without ever having paid taxes, made a contribution, are effectively expecting to be subsidised by the British taxpayer for those expenses. And immigration is a big issue in the UK. It's a big political issue. It's sometimes very controversial. It forms part of the debate we have at the moment in preparation for our referendum in June on our membership of the European Union.
Do you want the UK out of the EU?
Well, I'm not going to tell you which way I'm going to vote, but if you allow me to explain, I'll tell you why. Because in Britain, all civil servants, all diplomats, all ambassadors and high commissioners, we are apolitical. I'm not allowed to belong to a political party. I don't want to, as it happens. I am not allowed to campaign for a political party. In my 30 years, I've worked under Conservative governments, Labour governments, Conservative Liberal coalition in case of the previous government to this one. And so part of that deal is I'm allowed to vote in secret like any other citizen, but I'm not allowed, nor do I want to reveal who I vote for. And I don't always vote for the same side, incidentally. But I never say in a specific election who I vote for, and I will never say in a referendum which way I voted either.
Okay, let me take some comments from social media
Sure.
before we continue. Barlett says, ask the High Commissioner whether he's aware of a company in Ghana recruiting nurses for the UK government.
Well, I don't know if he said the name of the company.
Yeah.
I have heard of this, but the British National Health Service does recruit from overseas occasionally. What I can't tell you is whether the specific case that gentleman was referring to is a legal one or not. I'd have to know more details.
Okay, more questions here. Ask the High Commissioner if he follows our local league and what is his impression of it and the GFA.
I knew you were going to come on to that. That's quite a big question. Well, I mean, on the local league...
Have you followed it?
Not so much, to be honest. I mean, it only started again recently. I don't have so much time available. As you know, when I do, I watch the Premier League. But I think I've demonstrated I'm a big fan of the Black Stars. I go to a lot of the Black Stars game. I've been to several during my time, including...
You were at the Mozambique game.
That's right, and including like away in Togo, where I supported the Black Stars. Maybe I shouldn't have done because I'm also ambassador to Togo.
Togo,
so
yeah.
I probably should have been more neutral.
But you live here anyway.
Exactly. And I just don't have the bandwidth or the spare time to really get in detail into the local league. But local leagues are important. They're the way new talent comes up. And where tomorrow's stars are going to appear from. Absolutely.
And there's a question about the GFME. You and the GFA have some relationship. Not a very exciting one, but some relationship. You recently met them.
Yes.
Yes. And what's the relationship like now?
Well, I think everybody knows what happened. I did in an interview, again, because I was asked. And when I'm asked questions, I try my best to answer them rather than evade them. I was asked my impression. I said it wasn't clear to me what the FIFA money that comes into Ghana, and many other countries, by the way, what it's actually gone towards in terms of supporting grassroots football. What I didn't do was, and don't do, is indulge in any personal insults of individuals, which is what I felt came back in response. We did have a long meeting at the GFA with the president and the board, heart-to-heart. We put on the table what we said. We agreed that because we're having a confidential conversation by definition, it means you don't then go and rerun every word of it in public. But I think the important thing is as of just a few weeks ago, we're in a new age because of the changes at FIFA, the change of regime there, and we're in a new age of much greater transparency in football, which applies to FIFA, it applies to all national football associations in any country, including mine, where there has to be a lot more transparency about the money that's moving around in the game and what it's used for and how it benefits the grassroots. And I think one of the prime raison d'etre of FIFA is, and certainly should be, to promote grassroots football all over the world, and particularly in countries where resources are difficult to obtain for that. They've got a huge role to play in that, and I think the National Football Association has got a prime role there as well.
Okay, Jerry Coleman, please ask the High Commissioner which English team he supports. Oh, I'm surprised you don't know. He's a West Ham fan, unfortunately. I mean, he left all the great teams to support a team such as West Ham.
Could I just add that for those who don't know, West Ham is the team that's currently above Manchester United in the English Premier League Premiership League table.
For now, okay. Kindly ask the High Commissioner about education in the UK and how to get enrolled. Well, he just mentioned that. There's another question from Jeremiah Isiama. Can you try and source funds to build a football pitch for your love for Ghana football?
Well, there's a lot of demands on us to fund this, that and the other, I must admit, and I understand why. It's a daily thing. We get requests to fund either individual needs or projects. There are British private projects in football in this country, like the Right to Dreams Academy, for example, which has been very successful in producing Ghanaian superstars, really, in the football world. There are British companies like Tullow Oil, which have funded some football activities in the past. Again, I think the prime responsibility for funding grassroots football in any country is the Football Association of that country, particularly making use of the money that is supposed to trickle down from FIFA centrally.
Okay. You get amazed then each time we talk about the ages of our players. Is there an issue with the ages of the players? Anything that you find pretty alarming about these players and their ages?
Yeah. Well, I have to respect confidences, but yes, allegations have been made to us in respect of certain individual players who I won't name, that they are older than their stated age. Now, of course, allegations can be completely false and spurious and malicious. They can also be true. And it is very difficult to prove definitively, and players presumably are in possession of birth certificates and passports which show the age they claim to be. But it is an important issue. It is one, if serious allegations are made, that we would look at, because of course, if, and I speak hypothetically, there is no proven case right now. There's just claims that have been made to us. But if it were to happen, then of course, from our perspective, it could potentially be immigration fraud, someone lying about their age in securing a visa and a work permit. But of course, perhaps just as importantly, more importantly, there would be an issue, a commercial, contractual issue between a player and a club, because presumably a club wouldn't offer a contract, or not the same contract, to a player who was nearer the end of his career than to a player who was just at the start of his career and who that club thought had many, many years ahead of them, and in fact their peak playing years and seasons ahead of them. They wouldn't offer the same deal. So it is an important issue, and if allegations are made to us, we follow them up. But there has to be a presumption of innocence until any wrongdoing is proved.
And are you close to investigating some of these issues, or coming out with reports with investigations into some of these issues?
Well, I'm not going to go into details, but if claims are made to us, and on the face of it they appear serious claims rather than just made up or malevolent claims, then we will look into them, yeah.
Okay. Another question here. John Benjamin is the greatest diplomat this country has ever had. Well, as he always says, he's sending you a check, so check your post.
Did I send that one? Who sent that one?
Enchironi, God's time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Ralph Dinko, and this one will make you laugh. Please ask the High Commissioner if you would ever give Obinim a visa to the UK. Should he approach, or should he apply for a UK visa?
If he applied for a UK visa, firstly, I wouldn't know about it, because I don't get told about individual visa applications unless there's something incredibly remarkable or sensitive about them. And yes, if he fulfilled the conditions I mentioned before, about having a legitimate reason to go, having the funds to support himself and the intention to return to Ghana, then like everybody else, he would, yes, get his visa.
Yeah, I think Obinim has every intention to return, and he's got the funds.
Well, if he would like to apply, then his application will be considered like anybody else's.
More questions here for you. Why doesn't the UK Embassy or the UK High Commission, in Ghana, for Commonwealth countries is a High Commission, refund visa fees to applicants who've been refused? Well, there's a thing about processing these visas.
Yeah, well, I get that question quite a lot, and I've kind of got two responses. Firstly, does anyone know of a country with a major visa regime that always refunds people who are refused? I'm not aware of one. Brits who apply for a visa to come to Ghana, which they have to get through the Ghana High Commission in London, occasionally refused for whatever reason, and they don't get their visas refunded. And the reason is that our visa service has, as far as possible, to be self-funding. Otherwise, it becomes subsidised by the UK taxpayer. That's what we charge fee for. And we charge really for the processing of those applications, and it takes just as long, sometimes longer, to end up with a decision that's a refusal as it does for an acceptance, because we make absolutely sure that the refusal decision is justified. We look carefully at the documents. Sometimes we ring people, we write to them, we email them asking for follow-up information so we can make a judgment. So that's where the processing costs come from. And as I said, who does refund visa application fees around the world? Maybe there's some cases, I'm very happy to be corrected, but it's certainly not a widespread norm.
But you do reckon that your visa fees are quite expensive?
Well, we set a rate that's uniform around the world. Some people think they're expensive, but I always make another point. If you can genuinely afford A, the airfare, and B, the costs that you need to for your accommodation, for your food, for your general upkeep in the UK, then the visa fee is really a very small percentage of that overall cost that someone would be undertaking if they went to the UK, either on holiday or for a longer period.
Okay, and before I move away from the visa issue, there's this thing about the IHS, Immigration Health Service, it's called?
Well, there is a charge, an additional charge, which was introduced, I think, just last year for visitors. And that's because, as I said, our National Health Service is free. It's free at the point of use to anyone who needs it. Doesn't mean it's free. It costs a lot of money. And that money is from the government. In other words, it's British taxpayers' money. So that surcharge was introduced in recognition of the fact that so many people come to the UK, and they're very welcome. We celebrate the fact that we're a popular business and tourism destination for people all over the world. But if people need medical treatment while there, this is a contribution to it. And the fact is that the surcharge is not very much compared to someone who really genuinely needed emergency or other care, perhaps an operation, if that sadly happened to them while they're in the UK. So we think it's realistic.
Okay. I asked that question because somebody actually just mentioned the IHS, and he goes on to ask, that's Kwame Bamfo, who says that, does that mean that if I go to London tomorrow and I'm ill and I go into any hospital, I would be attended to free of charge?
If you've paid the surcharge, yes. Yes, you would be. I mean, but you'd be asked to show where you came from and that surcharge had been paid. But yeah, when you go to a doctor in the UK, or when you go for medical treatment, within the National Health Service, because there is also a small private health sector, then yes, it's free, as I said, free at the point of use.
Okay. Now let's go on to the Queen's 90th. I mean, she's 90 years, she's turning 90, and she doesn't look a day past 50. She's so strong.
Well, I mean, for people like me of my generation, she's always been there. She's always been part of our life, part of our consciousness. She works hard in representing the country, continues to do so at the age of 90 very soon, and an immensely popular figure, the head of state, but much more than that, a figurehead for the nation, and much loved, and not just in the UK, by the way. I think very widely in the Commonwealth and in other countries too.
Okay, and you're planning a birthday here for?
Well, we have.
You do that every year, don't you?
We do every year what most other countries would call their national day. We call the Queen's birthday party, but we'll also have a separate event in June on her actual 90th birthday. Not least because then in June England will be on their way to winning the European Championship.
Really? Because you beat Germany.
We can live in hope. Don't destroy the hope.
Because you beat Germany. The Brits have, the English have suddenly become very, hopeful.
Well, I think when I was a kid, every World Cup would come around, every European Championship would come around.
That's a very lovely picture of the Queen.
And absolutely. Yeah. And there was always a great kind of overconfidence that we were going to win. That's kind of changed over the years. I don't think that many people in England, and incidentally Wales and Northern Ireland, as well as the Republic of Ireland, have all qualified, which has never happened before.
Yeah.
And I don't think that many people in England think we're going to win it. My favourites would be the French, actually, because they're the hosts and because they have a very, very, very good team, made even better now by including a West Ham player in their starting 11.
Well, interesting. Let's talk about social media now. I mean, you are a big social media buff. You love social media. You're on Twitter. Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I am.
You're on Instagram?
Yeah.
Wow. And where else?
That's it. I mean, for someone as ancient and aged as I am, it's quite a challenge getting used to this technology. I think the great thing about it is, I think you said in your introduction, is it a blessing or a curse? I think it's a net blessing, but there are strong elements of a curse sometimes, particularly people who spread, violent messages, racist messages, false rumours about people. There are aspects of it that are a blessing. But for me, it's just it's a great tool of communication, and it is that it is different, but it's not a whole new species. It is just another form of communication. And what attracts me to it in my job is that it's very democratic. It means you can have a conversation with anyone who uses that media. People can ask questions. As I said, I always put in as much time and effort as I can to answer those questions. And I think it's important because people in my job as diplomats, traditionally, and probably with good reason, were seen as distant and elitist and remote and not in touch with ordinary people. And I think it's fantastic in breaking down that barrier and having a very wide-ranging conversation. I think it's important.
Okay, and I mean, when you walk across town or drive through town, I'm sure you find people coming to you to talk to you about social media and how active you are on social media. Is this something you tell your staff to join social media? I mean,
oh, look, we encourage it, but it's certainly not an instruction.
It's
It's up to each individual. But it is, in generally speaking, it is policy in our Foreign Service to be very active on social media. Of course, that means taking risks. The only way never to be controversial, never to make a mistake, is never to say anything, ultimately. So if you have complete risk aversion, sure, you never get anything wrong. You're never commented on at all. But I believe diplomacy, part of diplomacy, is about getting messages across, about having impact. It's about having debates about the big issues of the day. And social media is a great tool for doing that.
Okay, so today one of our reporters that was actually finding out from people why they like you on social media, apparently you love banter. And so that's the reason they like. We'll talk to you about banter very soon. But let's talk about terrorism. Yeah. We've seen attacks in Mali, Burkina Faso, and just recently, Ivory Coast. Yeah. And I mean, the number of Ghanaians who've been sitting on pins, you know, very nervous about the threat of Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb and what they've been doing in the sub-region. What are your thoughts on terrorism generally, before we concentrate on the sub-region?
Well, of course, from the British point of view, this is something we're incredibly worried about in its different forms. We've lived with terrorism for many decades now. It's obviously different types of terrorism, different types of movements behind them. But you know, we've got over 140 people in prison in the UK right now for terrorism-related offences. We've had, I think, 7 plots, major plots, foiled in the UK just in the last year or so. There have been, you know, 14 major attacks around the world, including in Europe, in the last year. And British people have been affected. In Tunisia, for example, most of the holidaymakers who were shot by the gunmen there were British. So it's something that's very, very, very important to us. And therefore, here in Ghana, we work very, very closely with the government, with the BNI, with the national security. Again, by its very nature, it's operational. It's often intelligence-based. It doesn't lend itself, unfortunately, to being discussed in public, in detail. With regard to Ghana, Ghana's got some great assets and some great things that it's important to protect, like a very peaceful society generally, great inter-ethnic and inter-religious harmony. These are great things, and they're worth protecting. So we're very happy to work with the Ghanaian authorities in doing so. There's no specific intelligence I'm aware of about the possible spread of this to Ghana, but neither was there in Côte d'Ivoire, I think, in the specific case. As we've seen, it takes very few people actually to pull off a major terrorist attack. So it is of great worry, it is of great concern, and we will work very, very closely. And everyone should be vigilant, because there's an underlying threat of it throughout the region, throughout the world, or in most parts of the world. And we'll continue to work with the government here. And we have done so. We've had some recent exchanges between national security officials on this, and it's an area we're looking at extremely closely.
Okay, now let's talk about banter. Why do you just enjoy banter, especially with Manchester United fans?
Well, banter is a great British tradition. Now, I understand it's peculiar to our sense of humour and so on, and other people have a different view. Other people have different types of sense of humour. Sometimes people can be offended by something that I genuinely meant entirely humorously. So, you know, I have to learn the lessons from how people react, because it's never the intention to cause any offence. Football banter particularly, in other words, teasing between fans of different teams is just a very core part of national life and our football culture in the UK. So it's something I reflect there. But it's meant humorously and it's meant affectionately. And the thing is about banter in football is you always know when you dish it out that the time will come that you're going to get it back again when your team loses. And,
do you recognise that?
Oh, that gives me great joy. Great joy seeing that. Yeah, absolutely.
How was the Liverpool game?
Well, that's right. And incidentally, if there are any Liverpool fans out there, I won't mention, in order not to embarrass them, the fact that West Ham have already beaten them 3 times this season.
This season, actually,
not once, not twice, 3 times. Anyway,
times.
let's not mention that. But West Ham are moving out of their stadium in a few weeks, and I've been watching football there since the late 1960s.
Yeah.
And for many years, I was a season ticket holder and went to every game.
How does that make you feel?
Oh, kind of nostalgic. But there are so many clubs in England that have moved out of their grounds. Man City, Arsenal, a lot of teams have done that. Southampton, it's generally been successful, and people retain nostalgic memories of the old ground. But times change, times move on. West Ham are going to what was the Olympic Stadium 4 years ago during the Olympics in London, and it holds far more people. It's a much better facility. So on the whole, I can't wait to see it. But I'm sad that a kind of one chapter is closing.
Yeah, very interesting. But can West Ham fill that stadium?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons for moving, absolutely. Well, considering we'll be playing in the Champions League next year, I've no doubt whatsoever. But of course, one of the reasons football teams move stadiums is because partly because the old stadium has kind of outlived perhaps its life expectancy, but also because they think they can get bigger crowds in a larger stadium. Of course, the amount of money involved in the English Premier League is enormous, and the next television deal, which comes in next season, is just mind-blowing. It's billions of pounds, and that means that there's a lot more at stake, a lot more money going around. So I think teams moving from old stadia to new ones will be a continuing feature.
Okay, more messages here. Enchironi says, social media is good. I love it, but it's not a curse to me because I really don't get the last part of your message. Donald Suman says, I really like John Benjamin. He's free-minded. Clay S.K. Bright, I hope the unconditional package to the EC will be disclosed, considering how critical election 2016 is to Ghana. EC cannot fail. Bartlett says the name of the company, well, he was the gentleman who talked about that recruitment of nurses, and he says it's called Rexel Internation.
I don't. Obviously, I don't know. To be honest, I've never heard of it before. But I'm happy to look into it if that person sends the details.
Okay. What are the High Commissioner's opinions on tourism development in Ghana? It is evident that there's a huge gap between ours and theirs. Tourism.
Yeah, I mean, tourism is...
Have you visited any tourist attractions?
Sure. I mean, I think I've been to 8 of the 10 regions of Ghana now. I've been all around. I think...
Which 2 haven't you visited?
I haven't visited Brongahafo and Upper East.
Why?
Just because I haven't got around to it. I'm hoping to visit Upper East soon. I'm also our non-resident ambassador to Burkina Faso. So the next time I go to Ouagadougou, instead of flying from Kotoka, I'm going to fly to Tamale and drive up through Bolga. So that's my intention. And of course, I've been to some of the forts and the beach areas and in the Volta region, and so waterfalls. Yeah, I think Ghana's got great potential. It's an incredibly competitive market worldwide, and you have to make a serious investment in it to attract tourism in terms of the hotels you offer, how the tourist sites are presented and maintained, and so on. So it does need a big investment to get a big return from it over the long term.
Okay, more questions here for you. Nanaba, can you ask the British High Commissioner why the British High Commission moved its visa office from Labone to the Movenpick? Movenpick is such a turn off. It's too bougie for some of us.
Okay, too bushy?
Too bougie.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what that means in this context. But anyway, I'm sure it's not good. No,
too sophisticated, too posh, plush.
Yeah. Oh, well, I wouldn't agree with that. But the reason is quite simple. So what we have, that's where the biometrics are taken where the applications are received, and is a basic anti-corruption method, and we do this all over the world. We completely separate the people who receive the information and receive the documents from those who make the decisions, and there's no contact between them. It's a separate operation. At the Movenpick, the visa application centre, people submit their applications once they've done so online, of course, and with the documentation. It's sorted properly, directed to the right place for a decision to be made, but those people there have no influence and no role at all in the decision making, so that's why we do it.
And now you don't process the visas here, you take them to Sheffield?
Well, some of them,
Some of them.
but I mean, really that's an internal operational issue. From the point of view of the visa applicant, it makes no difference, because we publish deadlines within which we'll get a visa
Was there a
return.
reason for the move? Is it to cut costs?
Well, there is a rationalisation around the world of visa services, because obviously from our point of view it's cheaper to have people in country than to post people overseas to do this.
Okay.
For example, in the case of British passports, British citizens cannot obtain a British passport in any embassy or consulate anywhere around the world any longer. It can only be obtained in the UK, although it can be done by post, by secure mail. And over a very long period, it's not imminent, visa services are generally, and any other public services are heading in that direction, because we're able, through new IT equipment and processes, to do that from a remote base.
Okay, Bright Humphrey says, Nanaba, allow me to ask the High Commissioner a very silly question. I see him promoting London every time. Why doesn't he promote Liverpool, Newcastle, Manchester and other cities in the UK? Well, you're from London, aren't you? You're a Londoner.
I'm a Londoner, and I do promote other cities, including in Scotland, where I was with His Excellency just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I myself, I'm unashamedly a Londoner. That's where I'm from. That's my kind of spiritual home, and I'm very proud of it. And I do think it's having lived all over the world in many different places, including its great rivals like New York. I think it is right up there at the top.
Okay. Ask the High Commissioner what his favorite Ghanaian food is. Carol, Ghana. Do you have a favorite?
Jollof rice and tilapia. And I eat very, very healthy. So basically at home we basically eat salads, fish, vegetables. Not completely a vegetarian diet, but with minimum kind of meat intake. But there's quite a few favourite restaurants of ours around Accra, and we enjoy that side of it too.
Okay. Now let's talk about trade between Ghana and the UK. We have a number of UK businesses or companies in Ghana. There's of course an imbalance, a trade imbalance. You bring in more than we take to your country. Has it improved over the years though?
Yeah, it's variable though. The total trade relationship between in goods and services is over £1 billion, although it has dropped somewhat, perhaps because of economic conditions over the last few years. It's dropped from its peak, and we want to get it back up there again. But through, for example, the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union, we're very happy to support processes that allow Ghanaian products to go to the UK and the EU free of tariffs and free of import duties and so on, to promote exports in that direction. Obviously, my job is to promote the UK end of that relationship. That's why we've got a couple of big visits here next week, and we also discuss that closely with the government about how to promote more investment, public-private partnerships, how to address barriers to trade, whether they're regulatory barriers, bureaucracy, and so on, because we think that free trade brings greater wealth, much more so than in the case of aid or economic development assistance, whatever you want to call it. Free trade creates employment, and it generates a greater level of well-being worldwide. So we are free traders.
Okay, I don't remember what exactly it was, but I think last year you launched an initiative at your residence for young entrepreneurs.
Well, that's actually a DFID project. So aid itself is changing. It used to classically be direct financial assistance for hospitals, schools, what have you, and that still happens to a certain extent. But as I said, we don't believe that important as it can be, aid does not make countries rich. In fact, it can sometimes make countries dependent. So much more important is, we think, is to use aid to promote the real motors of economic growth that will create employment, and that's small and medium enterprises. So we have a DFID project called Engine, and it's really run a bit like the Dragon's Den or The Apprentice, if you've ever seen those shows, and small companies in Ghana, startups, entrepreneurs, they pitch their ideas to us, and the best of them, which is now many hundreds, get some seed money, they get professional advice on developing their business plan. A few £1,000s. It depends on the size of the company and the area they're involved in, but a few £1,000s, which is a grant, it's not a loan. But they also, as importantly, they get professional help to design a business strategy, to improve their marketing, and so on. We think that's really important because they're the people who will really be able to employ new generations of Ghanaians in the future if they're successful.
Okay, so it's basically for startups?
Basically, yeah, for small enterprises with the potential to become something much bigger.
Okay, and has this year's opened?
Yeah, it's several times a year.
Several times?
Yeah, and we basically, it's advertised, and people, I think if you just Google Engine in capital letters as an abbreviation, Engine DFID Ghana, or for those who are interested, the details will come up there. And it's very exciting. I met some fantastic people.
Do you have an age limit?
No age limit. The limit is how good the idea is. And there are some fantastic ideas, and there's some amazing young entrepreneurs out there in Ghana who are great hope for the future.
Okay, because I'm sure you do get overwhelmed as well, because you find a lot of young people who've come out of the universities, and because unemployment is so high, they're unable to get into any of these jobs, and so they have ideas, they want to start on their own, and access to loans and capital becomes a very big issue for them. So they do take advantage of this Engine program you talked about. Would you be increasing the number of people who are supported?
Not right now, but I'd say it's possible because the nature of economic aid is shifting away from its kind of previous classic profile towards supporting engines of growth. That's part of the reason it's called Engine. So I'd say there's a prospect of that in the longer term. But I think it is important to address some of the barriers, whether they're bureaucracy, regulatory, and obviously as Ghana's previous levels of economic growth are hopefully reached once again, on the back of the IMF program and other reforms, interest rates will come down, because I think a very, very big barrier to small enterprise here is obviously commercial interest rates of up to 30% and even beyond. That's a very, very big obstacle for someone to get over, and yet all over the world small companies need loans, they need capital in order to invest and expand. So that's an important blockage to address, I think.
Okay, let's take a break now. We'll come back with responses to some of the questions you've been sending, but the show is not a football show, actually. Everybody's sending questions about football, but before we go, this is actually not a question, it's a comment from Derek Ej, who says that Nana Aba, I think John Benjamin should talk to our members of parliament about the importance of social media. If our MPs were communicating with the youth on social media, half of our troubles would have been solved. Well, on that note, we take a break. State of Affairs returns shortly. Yeah, welcome back. This is a very funny comment from Bismarck Mensa. And now I bring the British High Commissioner every day. I'm learning to pronounce some English words correctly. Anyway.
With a London accent.
With a London accent, yeah. I know. Okay, so the MPs and social media, I mean, it wasn't a question, it was just a comment, but if you want to...
Well, look, it's not my place to advise MPs on what they should do. Generally, though, I think it's becoming indispensable in politics worldwide. Before I came to Ghana, I was ambassador in Chile in South America, but before that, I was the British consul in New York, a very exciting place. And I was there in 2008 when Barack Obama was first elected. And that was really when social media as a political tool totally took off, and particularly in appealing to young voters, which was a major part of, or one important plank of his campaign strategy. And I think that even then, there were some people who were skeptical, saying this is a kind of a fad, it's a trend, it won't last. But now I think it's overwhelmingly demonstrated. And some people said, oh, but it's only going to be the preserve of perhaps more developed countries. But then there's been a total IT revolution, and people get smartphones, they've become much cheaper. People use smartphones for mobile money and for all sorts of uses. And when you get a smartphone now, all this stuff comes with it automatically. And so it's really taken. I was very struck by another country. I used to live in Indonesia. It's got one of the world's highest social media uses anywhere. Actually, tomorrow I'm having a visit at the High Commission from the head of Africa for Facebook. So I'm really interested. I'm going to ask some questions about what the trends look like in this part of Africa and in the continent as a whole, because I think it's something that's just going to mushroom ever more. So therefore, in theory, anyone involved in politics from whatever aspect ought to be looking at it as an indispensable tool rather than as something that's just an optional add-on.
Okay. For the next few minutes, I'll just have you respond to some of the questions that are coming. Mohammed Abubakar, how does one qualify for the UK scholarship he mentioned this evening?
Again, the easiest thing I can suggest is just Google Chevening. We're actually finishing this year's at the moment. We've interviewed scores and scores of incredibly talented young Ghanaians for master's degrees, so for postgraduate studies, and not for first degrees usually. And we're now in the process of choosing 20 amongst them to start at university in the UK in the autumn. And we now have well over 200 Chevening alumni back in Ghana, some who started 30 years ago when the scholarship scheme first started. So we've got a growing kind of alumnus network. But Google Chevening, which is Chevening, Ghana, and it'll come up, and we will start the application process again towards the end of this year.
If the London accent was too heavy, Chevening. That's it.
That's it.
Okay. Jonah Savimbi, ask John why Ghana and UK can't have a visa-free accord, looking at the rich history between the two countries.
Yeah, I get that question sometimes. No, I understand the question, but look, Britain is a small island. It's in global terms, in size, physical size terms. We are a population of 65 million. We can't have completely unrestricted migration, either temporary or permanent, from all over the world. And so we have a visa regime to have oversight of who comes in, comes out, and that's not going to change. You haven't said my Twitter handle, Anna, so that even more people can now jump in and ask questions.
If you have any questions for him because I'm getting actually a deluge of messages, I may not be able to read all of them. So his Twitter handle is John Benjamin 19, and the John is without H, so it's Jon. I don't know what your parents did with your H.
It's short for Jonathan, but...
so you're Jonathan.
I was, but when I was a kid, Jonathan Benjamin just sounded like an age to say the name. It's far too long, so I shortened the John bit, yeah.
Okay. All right. I was wondered.
Yeah, but nobody calls me that except my mother, so...
Jonathan Benjamin. Yeah. I think that's how I'll start calling you now. All right. So it's John Benjamin 19, capital Jon, and then capital BENJAMIN 19. That's the Twitter handle, and then we'll crawl it shortly as well on your screens. But let's go for some more questions here. I'm trying to locate one from Mutumbo the poet.
My friend. Yeah.
Yes.
Who's one of the best performance poets.
You've seen him
in the whole
perform?
country. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay. He had a question about the EU, UK's referendum coming up. I'm trying to look. Okay, there we go. Okay, so hello Nanaba. Kindly ask John Benjamin how European footballers playing in Britain will be affected if they should exit the EU.
Yeah. Well, the short answer is I don't know. I can't say, because if the British people decide to leave the EU, we're in new territory. There'll be a new series of arrangements between Britain and the EU to define the relationship in the future, not being a member, but obviously still having close links. So it's impossible to say exactly. Nothing would change overnight in that set of circumstances. But, there's a referendum coming up on June the 23rd. The British government, who I represent, it has an official position of recommending that the British people vote to remain in the European Union. But as you know, there are MPs and many others, particularly in the Conservative Party, which forms the government at the moment, who are campaigning to leave the EU. So it's a very lively debate. I think there'll be a very, very high turnout in this referendum. And we'll see. There's not that far to go now.
Okay, and then he goes on to ask, would it affect trade?
Well, again, this is hypothetical, Nana, of course, but taking the question at face value, were the UK to leave the EU, it would have to negotiate new trade arrangements both with the EU and indeed with other countries at the moment, because our trade with Ghana, for example, is no longer on a bilateral basis. It's between the EU and Ghana, and increasingly now through the Economic Partnership Agreement between the EU and the whole of West Africa. So there would be new arrangements. Again, it's purely hypothetical, and it's impossible to say right now what those would look like. Okay,
Nana Aba, is the High Commissioner an atheist?
Yeah, I mean, people ask that. I'm not religious. I don't belong to one of the recognised religions. It depends what you mean by atheist. My reaction about, how did the world begin and how did the universe begin and is there another power out there? I don't know. I think a full atheist would say no, there definitely isn't. I just don't know.
Okay.
But what I do believe in is religious freedom. I think it's very important. I think in Ghana it's one of the aspects that really enriches national life and the culture is the strength and the variety of religious life. However, religious freedom is about the right of any individual to believe what they want and to practice what they want, but also about all of them allowing everybody else to believe and practice what they want peacefully. So I think that's very important.
Okay, this person has sent a tweet in a language I don't understand, and he says, beneath it, please use Google Translator. Honestly, if I have time, I'll do that. I guess it's French, but I'm totally lost. I'm not sure if it's French or Spanish, but I'll try and put it in Google Translator to see exactly what you mean.
Okay, let me know what they said.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. Okay, John H.A. says, Nana Aba, can you find out from the British High Commissioner how British businesses in Ghana fared during the energy crisis? Did any of them pack and leave?
No, some were affected by companies like Vodafone, obviously, were affected. No, I'd say on the contrary, there are British companies involved in the power sector who have been in negotiation with the government about whether they can help with the provision of more power. Quite a few came here, both traditional power companies, a company called Aggreko, for example, which provides it short-term emergency power solutions, but also we have a growing sector of clean energy, solar and wind and tidal and so on, who are looking at opportunities here in Ghana, which are very exciting because we all know that over the course of the next few decades, we have to lessen and eventually abandon our reliance on fossil fuels. And so solar, wind, and so on will be very important. And of course, when it comes to solar, Ghana is hugely blessed and has enormous potential.
Okay, so the tweet is actually French because I realized I saw Je parle français somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the question, what I put in Google Translator. Yeah. So if this is a lie, then it's not me. It's coming from Google Translator. It's he's saying that. Are you disappointed that a lot of Ghanaians cannot speak French despite the number of French-speaking countries around them?
It's an interesting question because, as I said, I'm ambassador out of Accra to several of the neighbouring Francophone countries. I've been here in Ghana for 2 years now and travelling around the region, and I must admit, if I look back to the beginning, I was quite, I guess, shocked in a way that there's quite a division between Anglophone and Francophone Africa, or in this part of the world, still now, and that's reflected linguistically.
A lot of people get shocked.
Yeah, and I think it would be good if, ideally, obviously it needs resources, it needs investment, it needs teachers, it needs courses. But I'm sure a greater proficiency in French in Ghana would open up interesting new employment and investment opportunities for Ghanaians as ECOWAS moves towards an ever more economically integrated market and area. I think it would make sense. I think it would be a good investment, but it's resource intensive. You've got to devote a lot of resources, find a lot of resources in order to make that a result in a generation's time.
Okay. This one from Yao says, Nanaba, the British High Commissioner is actually, apart from being obsessed with Manchester United, as you always tell him, is also obsessed with punctuations.
I think punctuation is very important, and I think...
I saw one of your tweets yesterday, and I couldn't stop laughing. I like cooking, my family, and my pets.
Yeah, without a comma.
Yeah.
It should say, I like cooking, comma my family and pets.
Yeah.
And if you leave the comma out, it means something different. I'm quite a pedant when it comes to English grammar. I think it's important to use language correctly, although I recognise that, interestingly, one effect of social media is linguistic. People respelling words and shorthanding, which you have to do to fit what you're trying to say in 140 characters. But I've been struck here in Ghana. Many older Ghanaians bemoan to me the falling standards in written and spoken English, which I hear the same thing in the UK. People complaining about the younger generations. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go on. I would like to know what the High Commissioner's opinion on fraud is, and I think he's talking about internet fraud, what we call Sakawa.
Yeah. Well, there was a very famous case last year where a Ghanaian who was engaging in that, and all of whose victims were in the UK, was tried and successfully and imprisoned here, and he is imprisoned here in a Ghanaian court by the Ghanaian judiciary and by the law enforcement authorities, based on evidence we were able to provide from the UK, which included British witnesses by video link, which was a first, I think. So, yeah, it is a serious issue. We hope that fewer people will fall prey to that as it becomes better known. But then the fraudsters are becoming much more sophisticated in what they're trying to do. But I still get emails quite often saying, my uncle was the president of somewhere or other and he died and left $15 million. Please send me your bank account and you can have half of it. Well,
it boils down to greed, really.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. And now, Nana, but I think John Benjamin's stay in Ghana his exit from Ghana will be on a high note if he's able to organize a Ghana-England friendly.
A few people have been asking me that recently. It's not mine to organise, unfortunately. It would have to be between the two football associations. And sadly, money is a factor now in arranging any international football matches.
Did you watch the last one? It was the first one in how many years? Ghana, when we actually had to beat England for a goal from a player from your team.
Yeah, that's right. When was it? Was that about 6 years ago?
No, it was about 4-5 years ago at Wembley.
Yeah. I obviously know about it, but I'm not sure whether I was still in New York or Chile at the time, and the time difference meant that I wasn't able to watch it live.
Yeah.
It is about time England and Ghana played again, or indeed, why not Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland?
England and Ghana. It would be nice to beat England very well in Ghana.
All right. Well, let's see if that transpires. But meanwhile, there are great footballing links between the two countries. Obviously, not just the players now and the recent players. We've been trying to promote a historic figure called Arthur Wharton, who was the first ever black professional footballer in the UK, in the world, in fact, but it happened to be in the UK. And he was born in Jamestown, and he came from Ghana, from the then Gold Coast, from Jamestown. And we think he's too little known in both the UK and in Ghana, and we're trying to promote that.
Okay. Will the UK ever have a black prime minister? This is from Mike L. Sumaila.
Oh, I'd say definitely. I don't know who yet, but absolutely. I'm sure. But I can't say who or when, but I would say it's an absolute certainty at some point.
And for my bias, I would say let's have another female prime minister before a black prime minister. Probably a black man. Another female prime minister.
Yeah. Or a female black prime minister, why not?
A female black. Yeah, the combination will be fantastic. Anyway, Simba says, Nanaba, I'm enjoying the show. Thank you very much. Good kids, can you ask John Benjamin to choose between poetry and music. He seems to love poetry more than music. Well, he loves Wiyala.
Oh, I think music, I'd have to say, although music, you know, singing is a musical form of poetry very often. So, but no,
Do you sing?
music. Oh, badly. So badly, in fact, that when I remember when I was about 14, and it was in the time when I used to go to not only every West Ham home game, but every away game all around the country. There was one time a policeman came up to me on the terraces at Upton Park, West Ham, and he got hold of me as if to throw me out the ground. So I said, "Officer, what are you doing? I haven't done anything wrong." And the policeman said, "Yeah, I know you haven't done anything wrong, but I just can't stand listening to you singing any longer." So ever since then, I've put a stop to it.
Okay. What exactly does the UK import to Ghana? Oh, I really don't understand your question. And what do we export to the UK? Well, I think you talked about trade.
Yeah.
Already.
I mean, some examples. I mean, one example of what Ghana exports, an example that I really like, is a British company called Blue Skies, which is based out near and so on.
The fruit juice.
And they package, they employ, they're one of, if not the largest private sector employer in Ghana now. But not only do they employ thousands of people, they provide employment for many more thousands of farmers in that area. And every single night they have hundreds of kilos of Ghanaian fresh cut fruit, juices on the British Airways flight, on sale the very next morning in supermarkets in the UK. And I think that's a great example of what Ghana can export. And I think it's also an example of something that's a bit missing, which is adding value to Ghana's raw materials in Ghana rather than sending the raw materials out as raw oil or crude oil or as gold, unprocessed gold, for someone else to, or as cocoa that gets turned into chocolate for someone else to process abroad and add that value to it abroad. So it's a great example.
Have you tried Golden Tree chocolate?
I think I have, yeah.
Did you like it?
Yes, I did. I'm not
You
a big
preferred it to
fan
Cadbury?
I'm not a big fan of chocolate generally, I have to say. I like white chocolate, actually.
Yeah,
if there's
actually,
anyone
I
out
do.
there
I like white
making
chocolate.
white chocolate. Has there Ghanaian white chocolate? I'm not sure.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah.
It's all dark.
Okay.
Brown, yeah. Okay. Kindly ask the High Commissioner how he sees Ghana's healthcare and what does he think about concierge medicine in Ghana. I think he's talking about the National Health Insurance Scheme.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
maybe comparing it to the NHS in your country.
Well, I mean, obviously a comparison has to be set in the context of the economic development of the two countries. I think it's a very laudable aim to aim for universal healthcare coverage so that everyone has access and a minimum of cover, like in the case of schooling. It's really important to get to universality. But at the same time, it's about quality. But sometimes the universality comes first and quality comes. I mean, we talked about elections earlier. My personal view is that in an ideal world, any modern democracy, whether it's Britain or Ghana or anywhere else, that's the sort of thing that should be discussed in an election campaign. It should be about schools and education systems and healthcare and infrastructure. It should be issues based, in other words. So certainly when we have elections in the UK, the state and the future development of our National Health Service is always one of the top 4 or 5 issues that's discussed. And I think it's very healthy, and it forces all those competing in an election to come out with a vision and plans and to explain what they would fund and how they would fund it. I think that's a good way forward.
Sabina Febia Bade, can you please ask the British High Commissioner whether the UK will consider a lottery visa, since it would be a good idea? The US runs.
Yeah. The US runs a lottery visa system I'm familiar with. It's not open to British people, incidentally. It's one of the few countries that
but
are
is
not
it
open
something your country would consider?
No, I don't think so. I think it. I've heard no discussion of it. I can't foresee it. I mean, I think the US is in a very, very small majority of countries that have that sort of system. I think it ties back into how immigration has worked in the United States historically. It's a way of trying to attract people from all over the world rather than only certain parts of it. But I don't see that system coming in the UK in the future.
Okay. Can John Benjamin actually kick a ball at all? I think his son will do a better job.
Yeah, well, my son's 3 and he's getting to that point where he's going to be a bit better than I am. He's a left footer, by the way. Yeah, I can still kick a ball, but what I can't do, the British High Commission's got a football team. I can't run around deluding myself that I can
Are they
keep up
doing
with
well
20
these days?
So,
They were losing so many games last.
Sometimes we lose diplomatically, you know, but we've been on a bit of a losing streak. But I can't pretend that I can keep up with these guys 20 and 30 years younger than me around the football pitch. So I miss it. I loved playing football as a kid.
Okay. Please ask John Benjamin, at age 15 years, what did he wish to become in future?
A diplomat. At age 6, 5. Nobody knows why, incidentally. There's no family connection, no family history. When I was 5, you know, when you're learning to write, and maybe the first ever essay in school, I'm sure it's the same in Ghana, they ask you to write is what I want to do when I grow up. And all the boys certainly in my class put footballer, astronaut, train driver, you know, and I put I want to be an ambassador. I spelt it wrong, but I did. But then no one knows
why.
I don't know why. I think maybe I saw a program when I was a little kid and it really fascinated me. I'm guessing. I don't remember that, but I do know I wanted to do that. So I feel very blessed in the sense of having been able to do the one job that interested me far more than any alternative.
Okay. Semiatu Al-Hassan says Nana and John Benjamin always engaged in the banter, football banter on Twitter. I don't know what you two have in common. Maybe TV programs on UK TV. Well, I love Coronation Street and I love Emmerdale as well, and then EastEnders. I'm not sure what you like. Probably something else.
Well, EastEnders is set in the part of the world where all my family roots are from, so obviously I like that one. I wish I could watch more of it, but because, you know, any parent watching will know, of a small child anyway, will know what this is like. If I try and change the channel away from you know, children's TV or CBeebies, there's all sorts of tantrums, so I just never get to watch whatever I want.
Okay. Nanaba, can you find out from the High Commissioner what he thinks about the 2 ex-Guantanamo Bay detainees living in Ghana?
Well, I've been asked many times about that. Look, this is totally an issue between the US and Ghana. I think both have been asked and have explained what's behind it. It's not an issue about the UK. The UK, interestingly, about 10 years ago, I worked briefly at the British Embassy in Washington. I was involved in the eventual repatriation of several British people, British citizens who were held in Guantanamo Bay. I know it's a complicated issue, but with regard to that's an issue between the US and Ghana, and representatives of those two governments I know have given explanations about what happened and the reasoning for it.
Okay. Kwame Ansah entry. Find out from the High Commissioner if he followed the arrest and deportation of the 3 South Africans who were allegedly training terrorists in this country.
Yeah. Oh, of course I followed it. That's job of a job of a diplomat, ambassador, is to follow closely events in the country where he or she is posted, obviously. Again, I mean, you have to ask the authorities concerned about their views on it. I think I did say earlier, and I would repeat in a very wider sense, ideally, in a democracy, no party, and here I refer to all parties, I'm not I stress again, there's no individual party or group that we're picking out, but ideally you don't want to have or anyone to feel they need to have private security or vigilante groups. Groups of young men, you know, perhaps unemployed or who are kind of set out to cause trouble, may well cause trouble. I mean, the job of security in any advanced democracy ought to be the sole preserve of the police and the security services.
Okay. HB Grey Music says, I think the UK would have an Asian Prime Minister before a black Prime Minister. It talks about the great diversity in the UK.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think it'll be about the ethnic background of it'll be about the capabilities of the individual, and it'll be secondary. Look, we've got an election in early May for the next mayor of London. One of the candidates is a British Asian, and that's not remarkable any longer. It's not an issue, and so.
Have you been impressed by Boris, the work he did?
Well, Boris, again, as I've explained, I don't comment on British party political matters. I mean, Boris is a great character. He's kind of achieved that status that's quite rare in politics or any walk of life, where everyone knows him just by his Christian name. And he is one of the great characters of British politics. But his term as London Mayor is now coming to an end, so there's an election which I will vote in, but I'm not telling you who I'm voting for, in just a few weeks from now.
Yeah.
Just over a month, in fact.
Okay. I'd like to see Boris Johnson as Prime Minister of the UK. I
Well,
think he's very vibrant.
yeah.
He's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, well, he's one of the figures who's talked about as possible,
Yeah.
but you never know in politics.
Yeah.
People sometimes emerge in unexpected ways. That's one of the things that's fascinating about it.
I've chosen a tweet that will be my last. There's a very funny one. It's from Sabina Gray Hansen, who says that I'm very disappointed to know that the British High Commissioner is married. Okay.
I'm very happily married.
He's actually added an adjective.
But I will say that one of the reasons I'm happily married is, and this is purely a personal thing, is because I waited a long time and to the right time to do it. I was nearly 50 when I got married and had a family, and love it, very happily so. I don't think I'd have been so keen or so good at it, if I am good at it, that is, if I'd done so in my 20s or 30s, or perhaps even 40s.
Okay. On that note, I have to say a big thank you to you,
thank
John
you.
Benjamin, for joining us. But before we go, let's take a look at our countdown from Ben Epson.
I'm sure many of you know how to cook. Some don't. Some can't even fry an egg. But at least you know that if you don't know how to cook, even if you taste the food, you know whether it's nice or not. Since 1992, there have been 3 regions. They are the kingmakers. War match. If you win, the 2 parties can get massive votes in their strongholds. NDC, Volta and the 3 northern regions, MPP, Ashanti, and eastern regions. Greater Accra, Western Central, you must fear them. Fear these regions, otherwise, Ubetikpe. We have the king and 2 princes. Greater Accra is the king of the swing regions. The 2 princes are Western and Central. I've told you to get a notebook called Countdown 2016/GH1 TV. In 2012, President Mahama, the votes he got was more than all the votes he got in the 3 northern regions in Greater Accra. The same applies to Nana Akufo-Addo. All the votes Nana Akufo-Addo got in Greater Accra was more than all the votes he got in Greater Accra region. But stop, yes. Don't say, oh, the Gans voted. Oh, yes, majority of Gans live in Greater Accra. But you should know that Accra is very cosmopolitan. For example, the Gan and the Gan Dangbis are here. We have the Ewes, we have the Ashantis, we have the Fantis. If you look at the results in 2004, MPP got 52% in Greater Accra, NDC got 46.4%. 2008 first round, MPP dropped to 45%, NDC increased to 52.1%, and in 2012, MPP got 46.9%, and NDC got 52.3%. This tells you that it's been going this way and that way. And if you take these swing regions for granted, you'll be taking your health for granted. Because most of we need to brew, we here in Debo Hospital. What to you? We have Western and Central. These 2 regions have also been swinged. If you look at, for those of you who have this book, and I've been referring to this book quite a lot because it gives you quite easy reference. You will see that once you have this, yeah, I'm referring to this book. Once you have this, it makes the referencing easier. In Central Region, in 2004, MPP got 58.5, NDC 39.2, below 40%. In 2008, first round, MPP got 46, and NDC got 50.6. 2012, MPP got 45.5, and NDC got 52.1. There's a small catch. If you think because of President Mos, that's why NDC won in 2008 first round, hold it. In 2004, when Professor Mos got 39.2, was he a Ga on Ewe or a Northerners? Was a Fanti. The trick here was that Professor Mos demonstrated that he was his own man in 2008 by refusing the suggestion of the Rawlinsons that he should take somebody else as his running mate. He chose now President Mahama as his running mate. And in Western Region, the MPP got 56.6, 2004. It dropped 2008 first round to 47.6, and it dropped further to 43.8 in 2012. The NDC got 40.9 in 2004. It increased to 47.1% in 2008 first round. It went further up to 54.4. Yes, it does. In 2008, I'm sure for those who are regular, I've told you that we did some work in 2000, 2004 to find out why Professor Mos lost in Central Region to President Kufuor. He be a native. So in 2008, 2009, we wanted to find out why President Mos won this time. And the miscellaneous of 4%, the different reasons. One stuck out like a sore thumb. That is 1.2% voted for President Mos because of John Mahama as the running mate. And you know that the 2008 elections were won the round of election.
All right, so thank you very much for your time this evening. I have to read this one out before I go. This is coming from my friend Kuku Yanka, whose English name is John Benjamin. And he says, John Benjamin's rock. My grandfather was John Benjamin. I am John Benjamin. My son Arthur is John Benjamin. There must surely be something in the name John Benjamin.
Well, look, I've already found 7 Ghanaian West Ham fans. Maybe I can find 7 Ghanaian John Benjamins before I finish my time.
Well, that's a start with Kuku. Anyway, thank you very much
once again
for joining us here.
And thank you to everyone who's been watching and communicating with us.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I didn't read your message. My name is Nana Abanamwa. This program was streaming live on gh1tv.com, and it will be on YouTube in a few hours. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Have a good evening.